Something has been happening in Greece in recent years. The once nascent startup ecosystem has boasted some impressive exits, the number of companies moving from the startup to the scale-up phase of their existence has grown, and more founders are trying their luck in tech entrepreneurship. What does the future of Greece look like, and where does technology fit into that picture? Here to enlighten us regarding all of these developments, but also to help us realize what is needed for the Greek tech scene to evolve even further, I have the pleasure of welcoming Dimitri Papalexopoulos, Chairman of the Executive Committee of Titan Cement Group and Chairman of the Board of Hellenic Federation of Enterprises. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Ms. Costantza Sbokou Constantakopoulou, co-owner and co-CEO of Phāea Resorts and Chair of Endeavor Greece. Thank you for being here.
Hello.
And of course, our virtual speakers today, I think connecting with us from the US, if I'm not mistaken, Andreas Stavropoulos, partner at Threshold Ventures, and Alex Chatzieleftheriou, co-founder and CEO of Blueground. Welcome from Athens.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
It's good to have you all here, and I'd like to start with a question to you, Costantza. As chair of Endeavor Greece, you have both a bird's-eye view, but also a company-specific understanding of developments in the Greek startup ecosystem. How do you assess where we are at the moment compared to, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, Marianna. To your question, it has been a fascinating decade for the Greek innovation ecosystem. To understand this, just remember where we were back in 2012. Back then, when Endeavor launched the office in Athens, we only had a handful of tech stories gaining traction and momentum. Scrooge, eFood, Viva Wallet, and a few others. The VC market was a very small market of what it is today. The amounts in every funding round were smaller, and the rounds were fewer. So today, we are in a very different position, if you allow me. The Greek ecosystem is entering a totally new stage where we see early but very positive signs of maturity. Today, the Greek innovation ecosystem is gaining momentum rapidly, and we are at the stage that every year is a record year. 2020 has been a record year in exits. 2021, as we've seen Endeavor, is a record year in fundraising. And we believe 2022 is going to be a record year in both. We have high-impact exits like those of InstaShop, Softomotive by Microsoft, Think Silicon, Lenses, Innoetics by Samsung, Beat by Daimler. We also have some mega fundraising rounds. Viva Wallet, Workable, Blueground, maybe Alexandros want to share more later, Scrooge, Epignosis, Last Direct. We also have world-class rounds from rising star companies like TileDB, Intelligentsia, NetData, who brought in Greece tier 1 investors like General Catalyst, Index, Bain Capital, and others. At the same time, we have never been more connected with networks of the Greek diaspora, foreign ecosystems, international scale-ups, who now see Greece as a possible location for their next offices and their teams. Those high-impact entrepreneurs, big tech companies, international talents have a huge transformational impact in the Greek economy. They make our local market more interesting, more extrovert, and ultimately they boost FDIs. So the vast majority of those networks are involved with Endeavor or empowered by Endeavor. Besides, this is the role of Endeavor, to bring those communities together in our global platform and multiply their impact.
It's very interesting how long this list is of companies that are active in this space compared to just 5-6 years ago, I'm guessing. And I'd like to hear a bit more about the different milestones that these companies go through. From you, Alex, as more Greek companies are founded and they have grown and matured, what would you say are the key milestones for them to reach the next stage of their development? And how do you expect that process to impact the local ecosystem? Costantza gave us a first idea of that, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah, and Blueground is one of them, right? We started back in 2013. Fast forward to today, we're present in 20 markets around the world, the US, Europe, Middle East, raised more than $250 billion in capital. So I think besides let me answer that question by covering a little bit what all startups need to achieve as milestones, regardless whether they're from Greece. Then focus a little bit on the Greek startups and talk about Blueground. How do we manage to achieve those milestones? And then talk about what would be the impact of all these startups growing and getting to the later stages of growth. First of all, in terms of, as also my fellow panelist Andreas will know very well, there are a few specific milestones, actually a pretty well laid out formula about how a startup can start, grow, and then go to exit. The first thing that a startup needs to do is achieve product market fit. That basically means that they need to develop a product that, very simply put, customers want to buy. And they need to do that in a very economically profitable way. So that means that they make money on the product level, whether in the beginning of their journey, or they can show how they can do it in the future. As they go through the different stages of growth, they need to exhibit high revenue growth. So that means that they can scale their annual revenue by 2, 3, or 4 times early in their journey, and then later from 50 to 100% or even more on a yearly basis. In addition to that, entrepreneurs need to show that they can recruit and retain talent that can scale the business domestically and internationally if needed. And last but not least, the clients, the customers need to love the product. So will they use these products again? Will they score high in customer-related indices like Net Promoter Score and others? So these are all things that the startup needs to achieve from the beginning until the later stages of growth, and it's not easy, right? That's why we have relatively low chance of success for a startup. Actually, the number typically cited is about 10%, but the upside and the experience are well worth it. Now, focusing on the Greek startup specifically, and it's not just about Greece, but any startup starting from a peripheral economy, let's say in Europe, they have a couple of challenges. One is the fact that the initial market size is typically small for a large company to emerge. Not for all of the cases, but in many of the cases. That means that the companies need to think internationally from the get-go. So it's not just something that should happen later, but they should build their businesses having that in mind. And the second thing is, obviously, in addition to international expansion, when you go to the growth stage, even though we have quite a few venture capital funds in Greece that are able to finance seed and Series A round, that means up to rounds of 5 or 10 million, then when you're moving to 30 or 50 or million plus in a specific round, in a round, then you have to move abroad. Most of these venture capital funds are based in the US or in Western Europe. So that means that you have to establish meaningful connections with these funds. At Blueground, we did face these challenges. So specifically, international expansion, we did understand how to do this very early on. We launched actually after a couple of years of founding the company, Turkey and Dubai, that were the initial markets. And then we went to the US in 2017. The interesting thing there is that we think that you can turn this from a challenge into an opportunity, actually, because there are things that you can leverage. For example, in Greece, we have our software engineers who are doing fantastic work in developing our technology, but we have a team in the US that focuses on branding and communications, which the talent pool is very strong there. So you can take advantage of this. Of course, nowadays, with remote working becoming more prevalent, you can also tap into talent pools in other markets, as we've done. It's expected to have offices around the world. So that's something that the Greek entrepreneurs can do as they scale their business. On the aspect of the growth stage financing, it was challenging. We eventually have raised quite a bit of capital, and the fact that we were successful in the US market was a key component of that, because obviously having a good track record in maybe the most competitive market gives a major proof point to investors that the company will also be successful in other markets, but it also tapped in a very big market like the US one. So that was key for us to be able to raise additional financing. So international expansion is linked to that, and not all markets come in the same shape and size, if you want. So, and coming back to the impact that these startups are going to have, I see personally a lot of great opportunities, a lot of great startups and entrepreneurs, as Costantza mentioned before, and I think this will be growing in the next few years, and we'll see a virtuous cycle where more exits are happening. These funds are being reinvested, more entrepreneurs are trying new ventures, and we're going to have an exponential growth of startups and improvement in the ecosystem. And of course, that will also help improve the overall the aspect of the role models in Greece. So have better entrepreneurial models that have been able to build big companies that are doing things right.
Thank you so much, Alex. You really touched upon some of the themes that I think we will revisit in the next couple of minutes. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on the investment side. And I have a question for you, Andreas, on whether you think Greece is now more on the map for global investors looking to invest in tech companies, whether in the startup phase or, I guess, most probably the scale-up phase for international investors. Can you give us some insight into their decision-making process when they look at companies like these?
Sure. So starting from the decision-making process, we should be very clear that investors don't change their criteria based on geography, right? A global investor is looking at things like the size of the market, the quality of the team, the intellectual property or other differentiation, or let's call it some unfair advantage that the company is able to build. And they don't look at that differently because the company is based in Greece versus the company being based in the US, right? You want to invest in the best companies that have the best chance of being really big deals, let's say, and have a positive impact on the world, regardless of where they're situated. So traditionally, that has meant that investors tend to look around the neighborhood, right? The reason why you have so many people in Silicon Valley is because this has been known as a place where a lot of people from around the world would come to innovate. And so if it's easy and you only have to drive, 5 minutes, you might as well invest locally. However, what's been going on lately, a few things have been going on, but the most obvious one for the past, let's say, 3-4 years is that the prices of private investment rounds have been going up, skyrocketing, really. The valuations of private companies, the competition amongst investors to try to get into the best companies is fierce. And that's not only on the investment side. You see that also in the competition to retain talent, to acquire talent, to find new engineers, to basically be able to grow your human capital, not just your investment capital. So with all that going on, and also because of some of the things that I think we're going to talk later around the impact of COVID and the nature of work, like you guys were talking about in the prior panel, now that geography is not as important as it used to be, and given that things have gotten so expensive in the already developed investment markets, investors are starting to look around more. Costantza went through a long list of successes that we've already had in Greece, both in terms of exits as well as large private rounds. And obviously we have Alex here for Blueground, who's proof of that right there. So it's starting is the answer. People are starting to look at geographies like Greece that may be able to bring to the fore this local advantage of retaining and attracting talent, coupled with folks who are willing to look outside the boundaries of the country for the market. The issue Greece has, as Alex mentioned, it's a very small market. So you have to find the entrepreneurs who are looking to build competitive businesses. And then, of course, you have to have some local ecosystem that can help you. Endeavor, as a nonprofit, does a lot. I'm on the board of Endeavor Greece and really proud for the work that the organization does. But also, frankly, the local venture capital firms, the early stage venture firms there, the budding ecosystem, companies like Marathon and Venture Friends and Big Pie and some others, they're doing a great job of nurturing young companies and then providing the introductions to people outside, people like ourselves in the US or others from around the world. The diaspora is starting to help. A lot of good things are going on in Greece, so people are paying more attention about all the good stuff that's happening there. And then, of course, the impact of COVID, which I'll save for another question, because I think it deserves a whole other discussion about how the world will be in the post-pandemic world. So it's starting slowly, but it's starting, and I think the future will actually be bright.
I think it's starting sums up the first part of our conversation, and I guess the second part has to do with how we can make sure that it continues to grow in this way, and that perhaps we can accelerate this growth. and reach a next stage in our ecosystem evolution. So I have a question for you, Dimitri, on exactly that. So we've heard of the things that are there at the moment. We've heard of a new mindset and outlook of companies, but are there still missing pieces that we need to address for the ecosystem to progress to its next stage of development?
As a true Greek, I will take issue with the question before answering
Okay.
it. So we are used to going to the problems before we celebrate the successes. Mm-hmm. And I would like to take the time, and we have time to go to the problems and the challenges, mm-hmm. take time to say that in my mind, the glass is clearly half full, not half empty. Mm-hmm. And there is tremendous opportunity here. And I would like to go over 10 reasons why I'm optimistic. And some of them are stuff we've already touched upon, all of us have touched upon, but bear with me for a minute. So the first point of optimism is that from almost nowhere 5 to 10 years ago, we now have a vital, small, but growing ecosystem. By some estimates we've put together, that's worth maybe the top 10, 15 companies, 5, 6 billion today. For Andreas or Alex, who are used to American numbers, that may sound small, but you put that in perspective compared to the Greek GNP or the Greek stock market, these are real numbers. And what's more important is our calculations are that we have a reasonable aspirational goal to get that tripled over the next 5 years. So if you get from 5 billion and 6,000 jobs today to say 15 billion and 20,000 jobs, plus the multiply 5 years from now, then we're talking business. Second reason to be optimistic, and again, Costantza alluded to this, even in the middle of COVID, we had some good exits during 2021, growing numbers, which would have been incredible in Greece a few years ago. So the exits are happening, the interests are there, we're on the map. Third reason to be optimistic, a number of global giants have elected to invest in people in Greece. And I'm thinking Microsoft, Accenture, Pfizer, and others. And there is, same as the exits, don't just bring money, they bring the entrepreneurial dream closer to Greece, and that is important per se. Similarly, those major investors don't only offer a few thousand jobs, but they create the potential to develop the skills and the human infrastructure we need to go much faster. That for me is hugely important and underestimated. The importance of that is maybe underestimated. Fourth reason to be optimistic, which I think has already been mentioned, an energized and really involved Greek diaspora. COVID has turbocharged that. The fact that Andreas and Alex woke up God knows what time in the morning to be part of this speaks volumes. Or if you didn't go to sleep yet, I don't know which of the two. We have a tremendous advantage. Just in biotech, there are 100 billion worth of companies controlled by Greeks. The synergies are there, and we have to take advantage of them. Fifth reason to be optimistic, the growing innovation capacities of Greek universities. So traditionally, we had universities that were not very close to the market. They wrote good papers, good scientists, good professors, but not practical work. That is now changing. The work being done in Crete, in Ioannina, in Patras is really actually practical work. It may not be, California singularity type of big picture, which is also, by the way, a bit smokes and mirrors. It's a little marketing, but there's real practical work being done, and that's a huge plus, and we can work on that. 6th reason to be optimistic. We have a government that gets it, and a prime minister who not only gets it, but is personally involved and understands the issue and is engaging in this meaningfully. 7th reason to be optimistic. Increasingly, there are serious people looking at the possibility of helping clusters develop. And we see that whether it's in Israel or other parts of the world, clusters have a multiplier effect. So if we start a biotech cluster or a pharma cluster or an agro cluster or a green energy cluster in Greece, that per se, and there are serious discussions on that, can generate a lot of growth. 8th reason to be optimistic, growing support systems for the startups. I think the work Endeavor does, and I'm also proud to be a member of the board, is fantastic. At SEV, at the Federation of Greek Industries, we have opened and tried to help startups. We now have 60 members who we're trying to help as well. And as pointed out earlier, also the big pies and the venture friends of this world are helping. So there is a lot of mentoring and an ability to go to people to get the soft skills needed to go to the next level. Ninth reason to be optimistic, simply timing. The next few years are going to be good for Greece. We will grow healthily. The transformations going on create disruptions that new entrepreneurs can take advantage of. And of course, the reshoring of Europe, of supply chains in Europe and ecosystems also provides opportunities. The timing is great. And last, and certainly not least, in my mind, probably the most important reason to be optimistic is the way attitudes to business and entrepreneurships are changing in Greek society. You know, 10 years ago, the average family aspired to have their kid go into the public sector or at best into a serious company with a sort of a sure salary. Now the social attitudes are changing. The new generation is more willing to take risk. The new generation is more willing to think of entrepreneurship. And society, which always equated profit-making with something bad, is increasingly embracing entrepreneurship. We measure the way our society looks at business. Society is looking more positively at business than in the past, but it's particularly looking positively at the startup community. And that, I think, is a source of good strength. So we can get back to what needs to be done maybe in the next question.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot that needs to be done. But I would like to stick with the fact that there's a heck of a lot of good going on and we can build on.
There's definitely 10 good reasons,
10
which
good
we
reasons.
just heard.
I'm sure we can think of more.
And the final good reason that you mentioned, this mindset shift, is something that I also agree is incredibly important. And we're seeing it in the younger generations, but also we're seeing it being cultivated quite actively by organizations like Endeavor, for example. So, Costantza, I'd like us to kind of have a look at what goes on at Silicon Valley and see if there are any interesting parallels we could draw. Because part of the appeal of Silicon Valley as an ecosystem has been this sense that an entire community has a stake in the success of founders, who themselves then give back know-how, capital into the ecosystem when they succeed. To what extent are we building such a community right now in Greece?
So this is a very good question for Greece. You're quite spot on, Marianna. We absolutely need to build a productive, a connected ecosystem in Greece. And actually, this is an ongoing process. It is also Endeavor's mission, and the reason we work with high-impact entrepreneurs. It is them who not only bring success on the table, but who will have a multiplier effect in the local market. Most of them, after their exits, they stay active and they contribute with their own way to create new opportunities. Also, they ultimately breed more success in the Greek market. They come from an environment where giving back is a norm. Thus, their entrepreneurial behavior becomes an example and themselves role models. So we want to grow this community. And in Endeavor, we run 4 main membership programs with almost 150 companies selected, depending on their attraction and stage. By the way, 50% of them come from the Greek diaspora. Through those programs, we further expand our community. We become more relevant to the local ecosystem, and ultimately, we serve better our mission. Going forward, Endeavor can be a platform where all innovative entrepreneurs work together to promote Greece as a destination for talent, investors, and founders. In addition, going back to what also Dimitri said, we work to fix some structural changes for the Greek economy, such as the skill gap, the financing gap, the narrative or the storytelling gap, and some other gaps that we see are depriving innovative entrepreneurs from the necessary momentum. So for that, we have created some initiatives. The main of those are the workingtech.gr, a platform with a goal to attract global talent to work in Greece. The Tech Trainee, through which we connect tech graduates and undergrads to high-impact companies. The Outliers podcast, that attempts to create awareness and communicate some of the most inspiring stories that we can share from the ecosystem. Innovative Greeks, a platform that a collaborative platform with SEV that brings together high-impact entrepreneurs from around the world who actually can play a role in the transformation of the Greek economy. Working with all these entrepreneurs who are either in the making of their exit or of their success story, or they have already exited the first business, is empowering, is inspiring. But I think it's, most importantly, it is necessary. And all of the above makes the future of entrepreneurship in our country a very optimistic place for me.
The future looks bright, talking to both of you and our speakers from the US. Alex, I'd like to come to you with a question on the labor market. Costantza again touched upon it, and the skills gap, if there is one, and where that is located, where the skills gap is located in terms of what is being on offer and what companies need to grow. You have a first-hand understanding of what the Greek labor market has on offer at the moment. Could Greece support a unicorn company, if that's in our cards in the next few months or years? And what are the skill sets most in demand?
Sure. Yeah, the answer to whether Greece can support unicorn or unicorns, in my view, is an emphatic yes. Definitely, there will be multiple unicorns in the next few years. That's my prediction, at least. And our experience, and Blueground will be one of them. Our experience with Greek talent has been really strong. Actually, our initial team, our executive team, has a high percentage, of course, because we started from Greece, that are Greeks, and they've shown drive. They've been able to be successful both domestically and internationally in our expansions. They've been willing to even relocate to ensure company success and grow within that scope. So overall, our experience has been very, very good. So I think the talent pool is definitely there. On the flip side, you need to have entrepreneurs and founders that we're increasingly seeing that are willing to build companies that are tackling big enough problems, that are building on a robust corporate culture. That means having clearly created vision and values, making sure that practices like embracing failure, thinking big, acting big, taking risks are embraced in the organization, investing back to the team, whether it's coaching, training, mentoring, and different. So these are the important things that as have been mentioned by our speakers, there are more and more entrepreneurs that are thinking that way, but I think we can get more founders that are thinking more long-term and understand that starting a business that will tackle a big enough problem, will be globally relevant, could be a 10 or 20-year undertaking. So, and I think the great thing that we have entrepreneurs that are doing this or have done this, and also there was a discussion about the venture capital funds now, like Venture Friends, that are coaching, mentoring new aspiring entrepreneurs. So I think that's great. And as I mentioned before, also, of course, you can also tap into global talent pools now, right? Because with remote working, you don't have to limit to one jurisdiction. Actually, all big companies or great companies are doing that. So there's also that potential as well. In terms of like which skills are in high demand, great people are always in high demand, and they can get a job wherever they want. Specifically within that framework, I would say on software engineers, there is increased demand, as Andreas mentioned before. There are more and more venture capital funds coming into the market. Actually, 2021 will be 2.3 times in terms of funding globally compared to 2019. So we're seeing unprecedented highs. So that increases the demand for software engineers. And also, the more traditional companies that don't want to be left behind, they're also investing in technology, increasing that demand for software engineers as well. And of course, also because of remote working, now Greek engineers are in high demand from European or even US companies. So I think that's another group of people that are in high demand is also senior managers, executives that are that can actually leverage, that can grow with the company and also be relevant internationally. The good thing, though, is that for companies and entrepreneurs, so for entrepreneurs that are building robust companies that are having all these traits that I mentioned before, people are loyal. They will stay with the company, they will support its growth, they will see it through for many years. So yes, it's a very competitive labor market, but for the companies that are doing things right, there will be loyalty from the team members. So I see again, as we mentioned before many times, really good things happening, more entrepreneurs kind of tackling big problems and thinking globally. And yeah, the talent pool, in my opinion, is adequate to support multiple countries.
Thank you, Alex. And we've been talking a lot about the future of work over the past 2 days here at SingularityU Greece Summit 2021. And I suppose the skill sets that we are currently building in that Endeavor and other organizations are helping build are the ones that are necessary for this next stage of growth for Greek startups, but not only for Greek startups. I'd like to get Andreas' sense of whether the Greek startup ecosystem is tapping into these exponential technology trends that we've been visiting over the past 2 days. Because, you know, at SingularityU conferences, we get this eye-opening view of cutting-edge technologies that sometimes feel a bit out of this world and certainly out of the Greek reality that we're often experiencing. So I wonder, do you think that the Greek startup ecosystem is taking advantage of these, or are we still lagging a little bit behind when it comes to technology?
Well, so exponential technologies are those that allow change to happen at an accelerated pace. So, you know, technologies that allow you to grow and to develop faster and faster. So by that definition, the cloud itself and any work that's done on the cloud, whether it be on the infrastructure side or even on the application side, is leveraging exponential technologies. Anything that happens within artificial intelligence, where the value of the data that's generated can make the algorithms better over time. They can start sort of feeding themselves the ability to learn and become better. All these are exponential technologies. As Greeks, we have a lot of very high quality software engineers that do focus on cloud innovation and or on AI innovation as two examples. So I believe that there are already a lot of examples of companies who leverage those kinds of technologies. But I wanted to focus for a second on what, while it might not be exponential, because it's more of a one-time shift, I think it is such an important shift. And by that I mean what you alluded to, the changes that are coming because of the pandemic and the nature of work. I see it as such an important shift, especially for Greece, that I think it deserves just a couple of minutes of sort of, let's say, double-clicking into it. Because that's an area where, to use your question, is not about lagging behind and trying to catch up. I think for the first time in at least a while, Greece and places like Greece have the opportunity to leapfrog. You know, it's never, when you're an athlete, it's never very exciting for someone to tell you, you know, why don't you try to just catch up with the rest of the group? That's not a very inspiring, you know, call to action for someone, right? Where you tell them, oh, just catch up with the others. Whereas if you tell them, you know, find the race where you can win, and think about sort of changing the game or redefining the rules of the game so that you can leapfrog the competition, you can be first. That is a much more exciting call to action for someone. And I believe that we have a golden opportunity as a country that's been sort of, in some ways, bestowed upon us by this change that the pandemic is bringing on our ability and our willingness to be able to work with, let's call it, fewer points of friction, with fewer transaction costs. If you think about the information age, right? We're in the information age. The idea of a 40-hour work week doesn't really apply as much, right? The 40-hour work week came from the industrialization age, manufacturing age, when, you know, people's value was measured, was analogous to how many hours of relatively undifferentiated labor that they were producing. In the information age, it's not about how many hours you put in, it's about how many pieces of inspiration you have, it's how many lines of code you produce, how many great ideas you have, right? So it's not anymore something that's, you know, needs to be defined by I show up in an office at 9 and I leave at 5. I have this concept I talked to a couple of people about that I call bright moments. that, you know, the value of information work is analogous not to hours of time, but to the number of these bright moments, moments of inspiration, moments of, you know, where things come together, these aha kind of moments that people tend to have. And if you think about where bright moments can happen in a world where people like Alex and I are doing right now are connected via the internet in all kinds of different sort of time zones, bright moments usually happen when people have a balance in their life, when they have something to look forward to, when they have, they're living in places that they really feel are, you know, from a Maslow's hierarchy perspective, helping them self-actualize. So because of all those characteristics, I think places like Greece are becoming already a destination for the best and the brightest, and I think they can be accelerated, such destinations, in the future. And there's many examples. We met with the CEO of Panther Labs, which is a Silicon Valley funded company. You know, they're doing a huge round right now. Hasn't been announced yet, I don't think, but it is a really huge round. And he was in Greece. And the reason he was in Greece was because one of his key engineers said, basically, I want to live in Greece, and that's that. And I want to have a team around me. So the CEO came over and looked at the team. It's now, I think, 9, 10 people, and it's probably going to grow much more than that. And he was blown away by the quality of work that's done by this small team and how much impact that has on a company that's going to be worth billions of dollars. So it's those kinds of examples that make me, you know, very optimistic about how these bright moments that can be captured at places like Greece will end up giving it the ability to leapfrog, not just catch up to the global competition.
It is certainly a much more exciting prospect, leapfrogging and creating something new, reimagining how Greece could be, rather than just catching up and looking at what other countries were doing in the past decades. On that note, and in our effort to identify the factors that can enable more bright moments, like Andreas said, what could be some of the key ingredients, let's say, for the next few years that we need to focus on in Greece?
Yes, we need some enablers to accelerate. Not everything is peachy keen, that's clear. I would like to briefly focus on just 3 areas: financing, skills and talent, and culture and culture in general. So financing, we are clearly not where we need to be. So if you look at the size of the community in Greece, it's 1/10 the community of Germany on a per capita basis, 1/50th that of Israel, which is like kind of the gold standard. So we have very far to go. It is not clear, obviously, how much of that is due to lack of financing, how much of it is due to other reasons. We're still at early stages. But financing, and I think it was mentioned earlier by Alex, I believe, financing is a problem. We don't have a very large angel community. The pre-IPO access to larger rounds than Series A is fairly limited. We don't have a functioning IPO market. We have a small stock market, and even venture debt is sort of not very accessible. So I think we need to more actively ensure that good entrepreneurs in Greece have access to financing, and they don't have to sell out quickly and get out because that's the only option they have. A second area is skills, and that is clearly a world problem. I mean, we can have all kinds of discussions about this is not Greece, this is everywhere, but Greece is even more acute, because I think the reality is we like to say, and it's true, that we have some fantastic people, but the education system, the way it's set up, does not produce enough of those people who can have the bright moments. So if you look at what happened in Salonika when Pfizer went there, sure, there are excellent people, and they were very impressed with the quality of people they found. But once you go beyond that first effort, the depth we have is not there. So we have to significantly scale up. We have to leverage the diaspora community to mentor people, more people here, develop them. We have to put better links between the startups and the more traditional Greek business, which has some catching up to do, to work together. We as Titan Cement have been doing some great work on artificial intelligence. I regret to say most of it with startups outside of Greece and universities outside of Greece. So we need to make those connections. We need to get not only Greeks, this is a great example that Andreas brought up, bring non-Greeks to Greece to help us develop faster. We have some brain regain. So there's a lot that needs to be done. Let's not sort of say that because we have great talent, everything is fine. Yeah. We have a huge skills gap coming up that we have to follow. And finally, I will come back to my 10th point earlier. It's culture, culture, culture. So how do we further develop this culture of entrepreneurship that Greeks used to have, and in reality we didn't have that much recently? So the work being done by the Junior Achievement Award that was started with Sev and now is headed by Marco Veremi, to bring entrepreneurship to schools. It's not too early. Get young people interested in entrepreneurship, to celebrate our successes more, to celebrate failures. This is still a society in which failure carries a stigma. Failure is great. It works. So there's a lot to be done, and I would invite all of us, and I know Endeavour is doing a great job. We're doing a lot of work at SEV as well in our innovation committee, in training people. There's a lot of work to be done in sort of changing that culture. And I believe the ground is fertile and we can move much faster, but we have to concentrate on it.
Absolutely, and I think storytelling is also a big, big factor in this.
Absolutely.
Because you can, that's something that has been missing, and we see more of that in recent years. The stories of entrepreneurs who are successful, the stories of people who work in startups that have great careers now. It's such a happening space that we need to really, really shed more light on it. And I think that starts from school, from as early as possible, I suppose. Now, given the fact that the theme of this conference is reimagine, I would like us to spend the next few minutes focusing on the future and trying to look ahead, make a few predictions in terms of what the next milestones for Greek innovation might be. Costantza, would you like to take a go first?
So, yes, I think as we move forward to a more location-flexible and more decentralized world, Greece will become the choice of home for shorter or longer periods of time for a lot of people. I think also the government's recent tax incentives will play an essential role to this. And so those people will work as digital nomads. They will work for the Greek founders, or they will join teams in Greece launched by Tech International founders. And that will create a density, a critical talent density in the country that will eventually affect the ecosystem. So the next milestone I see is the one where Greece becomes an international hub, and innovation becomes part of the country's brand narrative.
That's such an important milestone, and the multiplier effect that can lead to is huge, obviously. And bringing all of this talent, bringing all of this enterprise into Greece as a hub. Alex, I'd like to get your perspective. There's a big milestone that we mentioned a little bit earlier, which is the first Greek unicorn company. I wonder if that's also in the cards. You said Blueground is going to be a unicorn company soon in its future. I wonder what your perspective is on this.
I think a lot of what we mentioned already. So we're seeing the initial kind of steps of an ecosystem that's growing, and we'll have a number of positive things happening. I think and Costantza touched upon it. The remote working aspect is really changing how people work. We see it also at Blueground because we are actually the accommodation of choice for these digital nomads, which has now been the whole category is not the same as before, right? It's not just software engineers with backpacks staying in sunny places. Now everyone can be a nomad. So we see a lot of people being much more active in moving around the world, changing and living in different places. So that will help, obviously, the talent pool, as we mentioned before. But I think overall, we mentioned most of the points. We see some good attempts, some great companies being started and growing. So I think we just have to understand that this is happening not just in Greece, but all over the world. And we have to stay at it, continue being aggressive in terms of how we are taking big risks, if you want better, and supporting these new ideas and these new entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Alex. Andreas, I wonder, other than the milestones, whether you'd also like to share your perspective on how we can create more of a stakeholder economy and approach to all of these tech companies in Greece? Because Silicon Valley is known for that. Can we bring some of that energy into the country in the next few years?
Well, I mean, I think the point before about the change in culture is a very important one, right? The idea that we all participate. It's like the equity economy. When I talk about Silicon Valley, I always say it's like almost think like an equity bank. Instead of a bank that just loans you money and expects it back, it's everyone owns a piece of everybody else's success. It's not everyone and everyone, but it's many to many. So that kind of stakeholder economy where we get away from the idea of a zero sum, right? Because we're talking now about globally competitive companies where everyone can do well together. That is a very big deal for people to appreciate and understand. And I think it's already happening, definitely within the tech and startup community, but I think it can also be appreciated by the population at large. So I think that's the way you kind of start building some of the sort of, let's say, stakeholder appreciation of how innovation can be helpful to everybody. But the types of also things I'd be looking for to know that we've succeeded. Costantza mentioned a very important one, right? Greece as a local hub, right? Like to Singapore or Hong Kong of Asia, like they used to be in the 90s or the early 2000s, right? It would be great to have companies thinking, if I want to go after Europe, I should be thinking about Greece first. Frankly, it would be great to see people like Alex, right? Be the mentors of the next generation, right? Founders who've done multiple successful companies is one of the milestones I look for, right? In Silicon Valley, a lot of the people who have one successful company end up multiplying their leverage through people who worked for them times 10 or times 100, right? There are some people like Dimitri mentioned Marco Veremis before, Nikos Drandakis. There's others who are already doing that, either as angel investors themselves or as professional investors or as serial founders. It needs to happen more. And the last thing I would say is, being a venture guy, I'd love to see some top-tier funds creating regional affiliates in Greece, either de novo or by partnering or acquiring one of the local funds. I think when we start seeing some of those milestones being met, we'll know we're on the right path.
We'll definitely keep an eye on all of these milestones over the next few years. To close, I wonder if you could give us an idea of where you think Greece, the Greek tech scene, is going to be in 10 years. Reimagine where it's going to be, along with the milestones that are so important.
Anybody who thinks they can see 10 years out is probably kidding themselves. I will predict that Alex will lead a unicorn before the next year is out, and he's pretty close already if I have my numbers right. And he's too modest to mention it. And I will also predict that he will not be the only one for very long.
Okay.
So there'll be more. I will also say that what I mentioned earlier as a 5-year target of tripling the value of the ecosystem in Greece, if things go right with what we see, then we can imagine that not being aspirational, but being very, very tangible and real. And if you want to go 10 years out, then we will grant Costantza her wish, and we will have an ecosystem based in Greece that will be doing wonders. Now, is that good enough?
It's great. It's great. I think we all feel very optimistic coming out of this discussion, and I think that's also the point of these summits and these conferences, that you get to imagine a future that is maybe difficult to imagine at the moment, but could be a reality soon.
But for those of us who are old enough to remember Casey Kasem for the American Forces Radio Top 40, said he always used to say, "Until next week, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars." So we need to keep reaching for the stars, but we need to keep our feet on the ground. There's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you so much. This is the perfect message to close on, I think. Thank you so much for joining us, for waking up very, very early in the US to join us for this session today. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure having this discussion, and hopefully it will be an ongoing conversation on what we can do to create more value and see this ecosystem grow even further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a good rest, gentlemen.
Good night. Good night.